Good morning, friends, fellow chairpersons, all paper presenters, audiovisual team. I must tell you, presenters must be aware of the rules. They will be given maximum 6 minutes for presentation, after which their presentation will stop automatically. A reminder will be given at 5 minutes, if possible. Their marks will be deducted if they continue after 6 minutes. For the chairperson, 1 or 2 questions may be asked when changeover of next speaker is being done. I will request all the participants to remain in the meeting till end of the session, because some questions may be asked if we get more time in between the presentation, and final marks may depend upon that. For chairperson judges, please give marks in the mark sheet supplied to you and send it to WhatsApp that has been given to you. If you don't get, I'll tell you the number. Within 10 minutes of the finish of the session, each chairperson should, they should be there. They are free to ask questions, not more than 1 or 2 questions at a time from one speaker, so that we have to finish this thing in time. Otherwise, I think we should go ahead. Please start. Call the next speaker, which is Dr. Shaya Bharti. Dr. Shaya Bharti to speak.
Good morning. A very warm welcome to all. I'm audible?
Yeah.
Good morning, sir, madam. Very warm welcome to all. Thank you, as for giving me this opportunity. I'm going to talk on retinal imaging up to Aura without any additional attachments by Android mobile. To begin with the history, it was Lord et al. Who first started doing fundus photography with the help of Apple mobile in 2010. He used external light source. Since then, people started exploring with mobiles to capture fundus photographs. Few have also invented this kind of attachments. I haven't used any of them. Neither I have used indentation. I've used Android mobile and 2 types of lenses. That was the 20 diopter lens and the pen retinal lens. The steps are pretty clear, as it is already known that once the flash of the mobile is kept on and it gets coupled with the lens, it acts like an indirect ophthalmoscope. To capture the peripheral photographs, one has to stand diagonally opposite. Like, for example, if one wants to capture a superior view, one has to stand on the inferior aspect of the patient and ask the patient to look upwards. And as soon as the peripheral view is visible, one has to capture the photographs. Similar aspects are done on the rest of the quadrants, like the inferior, superior, and temporal aspect. The result, here we can see a retinal detachment with hole with operculum. In the adjacent picture, we can see lattice with hole. In this picture, we can clearly see hole with operculum, and in the adjacent picture, we can see a buccal height. This is a picture of lasered coloboma, and in the adjacent picture, we can see white without pressure area. This is a picture of aborted coloboma. Here I have tried to capture 2 aborted coloboma along with the disc. In this picture, we can see 2 aborted coloboma which has been captured from equators, and the picture goes nearly up to Aura. In this picture, we can see a pigmented coloboma reaching nearly up to Aura. This is a picture which shows lattice with multiple holes and Ora serrata. So the advantage of this technique is that it is simple, easy to capture, very handy. It is affordable in comparison to the expensive equipments. To discuss, the picture is sharp in quality, details are very clear. One can take quadrant specific photographs, like I have taken here the Ozurdex implant in the inferior quadrant, and this picture shows vitreous hemorrhage with a penetrated intraocular foreign body. Disease focus entity, disease at particular quadrant can be easily captured. In this picture, we can see here buccal height, which is very near to aura. The magnification is much more higher than the indirect ophthalmoscope and the wide field cameras. Like you can see a lattice with hole, and in this picture we can see a small hole with shallow SRF. To compare with commercially available equipments like Optos, which produces pseudo color, and in case of mobile, it captures pictures with true colors. The magnification is very high. The resolution of picture is also very good. The commercially available equipments are heavy and are non-portable, whereas that of mobile and Nokia are very small and can be carried in a small bag. The utility of this technique is that it can be used for counseling, teaching, telescreening, disease monitoring, printing, can be shared on various social medias, can be used for storage and documentation. So the take-home message is the technique is easy and is inexpensive. The quality of photo is of high resolution, wide field photographs can be easily captured, and images up to aura can be taken. I have no financial interest. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Firstly, I would like to congratulate you for finishing before time, and over to our moderators for the Q&A.
Thank you, sir.
I think this is a very good method. It's a low cost, suiting to our Indian scenario. Beginners, residents, and people in the outskirts, they can use this method very well. And of course, she has given very, very nice pictures. I'm very happy. I don't think many questions are there. The next speaker should be Todd.
Thank you, sir.
Sure, Doctor. So for the next presentation, may I please invite Dr. Richa Kamal. Ma'am, I request you to unmute your mic,
Yes,
turn
sir.
on the camera and start screen sharing.
Yes, sir. So is it visible, sir?
Yeah, visible.
Okay. Good morning, sir. Good morning, seniors. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Shall I start presenting?
Yeah.
Okay. My study is on foveal reconstruction and association with post-operative visual outcome post-macular hole surgery. Macular hole surgery is one of the most gratifying posterior segment surgery with anatomic success rates of 85 to 100% and visual improvement rate of 85 to 95%. However, in several successful closure, there are several cases in which we get suboptimal visual improvement. So there are several prognostic indicators of macular hole. Among them, preoperative, one of the most important is minimal hole diameter. For post-operative changes, there was an article published by Kitao and al. that said that immediately post-operative, there is initial glial cell proliferation. Subsequently, external limiting membrane bridging occurs, and then these glial cells proliferate towards the inner retinal structures, and then ellipsoid zone develops, and then the CIZ, that is interdigitation zone, develops. So the aim of our study was to observe foveal reconstruction and association with post-operative visual outcome, and the objectives were to check the foveal layers to evaluate vision at different post-operative period and to assess the association. So it was a single-center retrospective observational study of 14 eyes of 14 different patients in a tertiary eye care center in Kolkata from January 2015 to January 2020. Inclusion criteria was idiopathic full-thickness macular hole, cases with all data available for preoperative and postoperative months 1, 3, 6, 12, and 18. Exclusion criteria were high myopia, history of ocular trauma or any other retinal surgeries, any other ocular comorbidities, or if the data was not available. So for all the visits, we took full history and standard ophthalmic examinations. Preoperatively, we took BCVA and OCT to find out stage and minimal hole diameter. Postoperative to find BCVA, OCT to check for ELM, EZ, CIZ reconstruction, glial cell proliferation disappearance, and to find association between BCVA and OCT features, and appearance of dissociated optic nerve fiber layer postoperative and their association with the type of surgery. All the surgeries were performed by a single surgeon under local anesthesia. 25 days pars plana vitrectomy was done with then tricot assisted PVD induction done. 0.025% brilliant blue green was used to stain ILM, and then internal limiting membrane peel or reverse flap technique or temporal flap was done. Then fluid gas exchange, and then gas was injected. So total number of eyes studied was 14, and a mean BCVA preoperative logMAR value was 0.78. Mean age was 64.57, symptom duration 3.68, and axillin 23.62. So we tried to find out correlation between post-op duration and the logMAR BCVA, and we found that it had a significant value, and by 12 months it became stable. Then correlation between BCVA and number of layers reconstructed. These are the number of layers reconstructed. This is post-operative month duration, and this is the logMAR BCVA. Both logMAR BCVA and layers reconstructed improved, and by 12 months both of them got stable, and there was a significant correlation. Then this is the logMAR BCVA postoperative. This is the postoperative duration, and these are the number of layers reconstructed. So by 1 month postoperative, most of the glial tissues appeared, and by 6 months, most of them disappeared. ELM, most of them appeared reconstructed by around 3 months, EZ by 6 months, and CIZ by 12 months. And there was a significant p-value. However, no significant association was found between DON-FL and type of surgery, but we could see that 100% of ILM cases, 50% of reverse flap technique, and only one case of temporal flap was there, and that to develop DON-FL. So there was a significant correlation seen between BCVA and layers of reconstructed by 12th and 18-month postoperative. And at the end of 18 months, out of 14 cases, 11 developed DLM, 10 developed CZ, and 8 patients developed CIZ. Glial proliferation was seen 1 month postoperative in 12 patients, and 10 of them disappeared by 3 months and remaining by 6 months. So when we compared with the article by Kitao et al., they had total number of eyes studied 28, and ours was 14, and preoperative for our study was 0.78. For their preoperative logMAR BCVA mean was 0.70. Other parameters were comparable. Postoperatively, there was improvement on vision, but in our study, it became stable by 12 months. For them, it kept on improving beyond 12 months. And ELM developed at the most by 3 months in our study. For them, it was 12 months. EZ by 6 months, CIZ by 12 months in our study. For them, it kept on improving even beyond 12 months. So this is an example of good foveal reconstruction postoperatively with good visual outcome. This is an example of poor visual outcome with poor foveal reconstruction. So more the number of layers reconstruct postoperatively, better is the visual outcome, and it follows the sequence from external limiting membrane to EZ to CIZ. So in conclusion, postoperative BCVA is associated with foveal reconstruction, and it follows the sequence ELM to EZ to CIZ, and early appearance and disappearance of glial cell proliferation leads to good visual outcome. ELM reconstruct at the most by 3 months, and EZ at the most by 6 months, and CIZ at the most by 12 months. So limitation of the study is very small sample size, retrospective, non-randomized, and strength of our study is longer post-op duration in Indian population and better percentage of cases reconstructed ELM, EZ, CIZ, and earlier. So take-home messages: foveal reconstruction is an important prognostic indicator of macular hole surgery, and visual outcomes post-macular hole surgery can be predicted by post-op configurations. Thank you so much.
Hello, Dr. Richa, could you please tell me that what do you think is why the results of your study are different, in fact, better than the earlier studies?
Ma'am,
What could be the reason?
Yeah, most probably, I feel that firstly, preoperative logMAR BCVA was better in their study as compared to us. And in which I could not show in my study is that the symptom duration in few patients was quite prolonged. So that might have affected the study.
The study.
Yes.
All right, and what gas did you use?
Ma'am, in some cases we used SF6 and in some we use C3F8.
And there is no correlation with the gas used?
No,
with
ma'am.
the final result?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We could call the next speaker. Hello. I think we could go on with the next talk. Dr. Swapnil could come and start his talk.
Good morning, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. So, title of my paper is intravitreal ranibizumab and zone 1 sparing laser ablation in posterior zone 1 ROP. So, posterior zone 1 ROP is a subset of ROP with very posterior disease and poorly formed retinal vasculature. Till date, there are only 3 public.
डॉक्टर स्वप्निल, आपका ऑडियो ठीक नहीं है. ऑडियो.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yeah, so posterior zone 1 ROP is a subset of ROP with very posterior disease and poorly formed retinal vasculature. Till date, there are only 3 publications which document the outcome of laser photocoagulation in zone 1 ROP, and all of the 3 reports mention very poor visual outcome following laser photocoagulation. As per Rainbow trial, favorable outcome in zone 1 disease with intravitreal ranibizumab is 69%, whereas with result photocoagulation, it is 61%. But as we all know, the chance of reactivation following anti-VEGF monotherapy is very high. So the concept of combination therapy with anti-VEGF agent and laser ablation came. So the aim of this study is to evaluate the efficacy on intravitreal ranibizumab, that is IVR, and zone 1 sparing laser ablation in posterior zone 1 ROP. So it was a retrospective chart review, and we included all infants with posterior zone 1 ROP treated with IVR at presentation and zone 1 sparing laser ablation at 4 weeks and having minimum follow-up of 6 months. So zone 1 posterior area was defined as the area within the circle whose radius was distance between the center of the optic disc and the center of the fovea. During screening, we documented demographic profile, risk factors for ROP, and clinical characteristics of disease. Whenever the diagnosis of zone 1 posterior AP-ROP or ROP was made, patients were counseled about the treatment option and informed consent was taken at each step whenever the intervention was required. IVR was given within 24 hours of diagnosis. Follow-up was at first post-op day, 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks following intravitreal injection. And at each visit, signs of regression of ROP, pattern of retinal vascularization, and development of any stage ROP was documented. At 4 weeks, all eyes with zone 1 AP-ROP received zone 1 sparing laser ablation. The outcome in this study was structural outcome at 6 months. Favorable structural outcome was defined as absence of retinal, arterial, or venous toxicity or engorgement, absence of fibrovascular traction, and there was growth of vessels toward the vascular retinal periphery. Unfavorable structural outcome was defined as progression to tractional retinal detachment or regression with cicatricial sequelae. So in this study, we included 24 infants, that is 48 eyes. Mean gestational age at birth was 28.54 weeks. Mean birth weight was 1180 grams. And mean post-menstrual age at the time of first ROP screening was 1.9 weeks. So 3 morphological patterns were seen. First was typical AP-ROP that was seen in 75% of eyes. Atypical ROP, that is the vessels were poorly formed. They were in narrow loop and they ended in peculiar tangles, and there was absence of dichomatous branching was seen in 8 eyes, that is 16.6%, and hybrid ROP was seen in 4 eyes, that is 8.3%. So the mean interval between IVR and zone 1 sparing laser ablation was 29.62 days, and laser augmentation was required in 13 eyes, and second IVR was given in 2 eyes. Favorable outcome in our study was seen in 45 eyes, that is 93.7% of eyes had favorable outcome. Unfavorable outcome was seen in 3 eyes. So this is the example of favorable outcome. Unfavorable outcome, as I told, was seen in 3 eyes. All 3 infants were extremely premature and all had a typical ROP at presentation. So to discuss, when we compare our study with the previous 3 studies, we could document the favorable structural outcome in 93.7% of eyes as compared to 0 to 21%, which were documented previously. Shah et al. Has reported that intravitreal anti-VEGF injection in zone 1 disease caused growth of capillaries network from zone 1 posterior to zone 1 anterior and from zone 1 to zone 2, as well as opening of thrombose vessels. Why did we choose 4 weeks between the IVR and laser ablation? This is because various studies have documented recurrence following IVR in zone 1, AP-ROP to extent of 66% and in zone 1 ROP to extent of 61%. And mean time of recurrence in zone 1 posterior disease is around 5.9 weeks and earliest that is documented is 4 weeks. And the elimination rate of ROP is around 5.6 days in infants. So advantage of combined treatment, it reduces the number of intravitreal injection. Zone 1 sparing laser ablation preserves the larger part of central retina. Persistent area of peripheral avascular retina that can lead to TRD can be prevented by early laser ablation, and it also reduces the number of follow-ups that infants require. So it is a retrospective study. Since laser ablation was done in all eyes, we could not include a control group of IVR monotherapy, and refractive outcome was not studied. So to conclude, posterior zone 1 ROP is mostly present as typical AP ROP. Combined treatment with IVR and zone 1 sparing laser ablation appears to be an effective treatment approach in eyes with posterior zone 1 ROP. Thank you for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Swapnil. One question I would just like to ask, what was the way you gave the dose of ranibizumab and how did you go about it, the dilution part?
We gave half of the adult dose. That is, in adult, we gave 0.5 mg in 0.05 ml. So in this study, we gave 0.25 mg per 0.025 ml as per the rainbow trial. And we injected around at 1 mm beyond
Doctor, do you have some experience with the bevacizumab team?
Sir,
you have given ranibizumab only.
Sir, we are not giving bevacizumab since ranibizumab is FDA approved, and the chance of systemic toxicity, that is systemic absorption of ranibizumab, is less as compared to bevacizumab.
Yeah, so that is why.
Swapnil.
Good morning, sir.
Hello. What is the aim of your study? What is zone posterior zone 1 ROP? Is it in the textbook teaching?
Sir, the zone 1 posterior is not described in revised international classification of ROP, but the study by Kassenthal et al. They have mentioned how do we actually define zone 1 posterior area. That is, it is the area within the circle whose radius is between the central of the optic disc to the center of the fovea, and it is somewhere approximately half of the zone 1, and it is also called as half zone disease.
Yeah.
What is the aim of your study here?
Sir, the aim of my study in this paper was to study the structural outcome following combined treatment with intravitreal ranibizumab and zone 1 sparing laser ablation at 4 weeks in zone 1 posterior ROP.
Yeah, thank you, doctor. Please call the next speaker. Thank you very much.
We go for the next presentation, please. It's time up.
So the next presentation is by Dr. Dhaivat Shah. So can you start sharing your screen, please?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Dhaivat, are you here?
Yeah.
Hi, good morning.
Yeah, you can start sharing your screen. You're audible and visible. Go on.
All right. All right, good morning, everyone. This is a collaborative study which was done between Shankar Nethralaya and Chaitram Nethralaya. We evaluated the use of piperacillin tazobactam, which is relatively rare in the management of culture-resistant post-surgical endophthalmitis. So basically, a patient lands up at your doorstep with an AC tap or a vitreous tap showing resistance to 3 or more antimicrobial drugs. What do you do in these cases? What is the next step? So we'll go through some real case scenarios. So there was a case which presented 1 week after an uneventful cataract surgery with the presenting vision of hand movement. You can see an evident hypopyon. The fundus is not visible and USD shows multiple echoes. Now, on doing an AC tap, the patient shows resistance to 3 or more conventional antibiotics. So here we advised a vitrectomy. We gave multiple intravitreal piperacillin tazobactam, which showed sensitivity in the antibiogram along with a dexamethasone. 1 month later, the vision improved significantly and the eye appeared quite clear. And the organism isolated was Pseudomonas. The second case here was a case of retinal detachment surgery with a silicone-filled eye who developed endophthalmitis. Again, 1 month later, the culture showed resistance to most of the antibiotics. Hence, we advised a lensectomy, silicone oil removal, and multiple injections of intravitreal piperacillin tazobactam. And to our surprise, it responded really well. You can see the membrane contracting 1 month later, and post-op vision improved to 660. The organism that was isolated was Mycobacterium, again, a rare organism. The next case was a case of a 50-year-old male, 2 months later, status post eventful cataract surgery. The patient presented again with multiple echos. We advised a vitrectomy. The antibiogram was resistant to most of the conventional vancomycin. Hence, we advised piperacillin along with a vitrectomy. 1 month later, gratifying results. Again, the patient improved significantly. The organism isolated in culture was Echinobacter species. Again, a very rare gram-negative organism. Last case here was a case of an uncontrolled diabetic who underwent cataract surgery. 1 week later, landed up with a bad endophthalmitis, clog of exudates in the AC, multiple membranes and echos in the vitreous cavity. We advised a vitrectomy since the IOL was slightly subluxated here. We advised an IOL removal and we gave him multiple 4 to 5 injections of piperacillin tazobactam along with dexamethasone. Thus, eye structurally did well. The exudates cleared up, and 1 month later, the patient improved to a vision of 3/60, and the fovea, maybe due to toxicity of piptaz, showed and improved to a vision of 3/60. So the organism that was isolated here was Enterobacter species. Again, a very, very rare gram-negative organism causing endophthalmitis. So why piptaz? So there are studies, and there was recently a study done by Anand et al., which showed that most of the antibiotics which we use, that is Vanco, Genta, Amica, ceftazidime, they have only 55 to 60% sensitivity to conventional organisms. And I'm talking about conventional organisms, not the rare organisms here. In comparison to that, piperacillin tazobactam has a 32-fold superior strength and sensitivity, especially to bacilli that produce beta-lactamase. It is specifically gram-negative bacilli. So how does it work? Piperacillin basically it has a bactericidal action. It kills the bacteria right at the receptor level. And tazobactam helps in the breakdown of piperacillin. That is, it prevents the hydrolysis. So that is how the working occurs. Toxicity. So in real case scenario, there has no study been done amongst humans in the world right now. But there have been studies in albino rabbits where they said that they calculated, they did multifocal ERGs and full field ERGs, and they calculated the dose which came out to be 225 to 250 micrograms. So that is how the dose was determined. Since there are no studies done in human population right now, we cannot really comment on the toxicity. But in the case series we had one case which had non-improvement in vision post piperacillin tazobactam. So what are the take-home tips? What did the study tell us? We realized that, of course, when we do an AC tap, and if the organism sensitivity is to conventional antibiotics, we should go for conventional antibiotics like Vanco, Cephar, Deca. But in cases where these antibiotics are resistant, piperacillin tazobactam is a great warrior in this. Again, the drug dose determined is 225 micrograms, which is again repeated at 48 hours. And once reconstituted, we use the injections for 2 to 3 days. Very important thing again, the injection of piptaz should never be mixed with Dexa. If you want to give Dexa, you have to give it with 2 separate syringes. So in the era of multi-drug resistance endophthalmitis, piperacillin tazobactam is a great tool to use. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daivat. Do we have any questions from?
I think Dr. Rohan Chauhan wants to ask one question to Dr. Daivat.
Dr.
Dr.
Devat,
Rohan Chauhan.
yes,
Dr. Rohan, good morning.
good morning.
Yeah.
Dr. Devat, what are your thoughts on putting a silicone oil in a PL with a bad exudate eye?
If the patient has developed endophthalmitis, there are studies which say that silicone oil prevents the transmission or reduces the bacterial load, which I also personally believe. So in endophthalmitis, if the eye is PL, I tend to use silicone oil. And then if I want to add intravitreal antibiotic, I usually give it at half dose.
How do you
I think-
inject?
I
Yeah, yeah,
inject.
please.
So if the patient is aphakic, I go through the corneal route. But if the patient is pseudophakic, I use the same 3 mm and I inject half dose of the antibiotics. I use a 30 gauge needle so that silicone oil does not tap out.
Differentiation between the empty vitreous cavity and the oil-filled eye. Any special care?
So the dose becomes reduced because the cavity is already oil filled. Since if we inject more, the IOP will go high. The second thing, we need to make sure that after the injection is done, the silicone oil is not, the egress of the silicone oil is not there. So if it is emulsified, sometimes the egress of the silicone oil might come out and you might lead to unnecessary changes.
How
Thank you,
many
doctor.
days you have to wait for receiving culture sensitive, but because the endophthalmitis is a devastating situation. So by that time, some cornea will be hazy, so that further vitrectomy will not be possible. So patient has come very earlier with you. In which steps you have to take from your aspect?
Okay, so when the patient comes with a PL vision or a hand movement vision with an endophthalmitis, we generally tend to go for vitrectomy along with antibiotics. But if the vision is significantly better, comparatively like 1/60 or 2/60, we can take an AC tap, inject an antibiotic. The AC tap result, culture result will come in 4 to 5 days. Till then, we can use 2 doses of antibiotics and then we can go accordingly. If the sensitivity is fine, we can go for VCD. If the sensitivity is not there, if the culture is resistant, then we can go for piperacillin tazobactam or imipenem. I choose
Thank you,
piptaz because
Dr.
it is
David.
relatively.
We are short of time. We'll
Thank you.
ask for the
Thank
next
you.
speaker.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you very much.
Dr.
Thank
David
you.
Shah.
Thank you very much.
Next up, may I please
Next
invite our
speaker, please.
next speaker, Dr. Shroff Rahul Ashok.
I'm just sorry to interrupt, Dr. Amit here. I request all the esteemed judges to please cut short the discussion as much as possible
Yeah.
so that we can finish the session on time. Thanks a lot. Please go ahead with the presentations.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amit. Next, we have Dr. Shroff Rahul Ashok. Do we have him over here? I think no. Okay, let's move ahead with Dr. Purva Walvekar. Good morning, doctor. Yes, I would request you to please unmute your mic. You are visible to us, and also start your screen sharing. Just a moment, I'll give you the control to unmute. Please press on unmute. Yes, let's begin, ma'am.
Good morning, sir. My presentation is visible on screen.
Ma'am, you're visible, and let's begin as the timer has started.
Good morning, everyone. Today, I'll be presenting a paradigm shift in management of ROP. I have no financial disclosures. Coming to the aim of our study was to investigate the efficacy, safety, and anatomical outcomes associated with intravitreal anti-VEGF, ranibizumab, in treatment of ROP. It was a retrospective study of 24 infants, was conducted at Tertiary Eye Care Hospital. The screening criteria were gestational age less than 32 weeks, birth weight less than 1.5 kg, any unstable clinical course as determined by primary neonatologist. Staging was done as per ICROP classification and indication for treatment was followed as per ETROP. Under all aseptic precaution, IV ranibizumab 0.2 milligram in 0.02 ml was injected in each eye, 0.5 to 1 ml posterior to the limbus under topical anesthesia with a standby presence of anesthesiologist. The follow-up was done on next day, alternate day, and then weekly and monthly followed up done for 6 months. Around 60% were male babies. Around 80% babies were delivered by cesarean section and 1/3 had RDS. 8% babies had septicemia, whereas 16 had anemia. The mean gestational age was 32 weeks and mean birth weight was 1.4 kg. As we can see, nearly 60% had zone 2 involvement. Around 40% had APROP. Results were defined as a total of 48 eyes were treated with ranibizumab. Treatment success was defined as complete regression of ROP and vascularization into zone 3, which was observed in 75% in our study. Secondary treatment success was when additional laser was given. That was needed in 25% of the cases. Major complications were defined as corneal opacity, lens opacity, retinal or vitreous hemorrhage, retinal detachment, optic atrophy, or patient mortality. None was seen in our study. A RETCAM image of left eye is showing zone 2, stage 3 APROP. After a single IVR, patient condition was resolved completely, which can be seen at 10 months follow-up. Coming to the other case, a RETCAM image is showing zone 2, stage 3 APROP. Complete resolution did not occur after a single injection, so laser ablation was done. A good outcome was observed at 6 months. Indication for retreatment are poorly defined. In our series, retreatment was done at mean age of 44 weeks, corresponding to the 8 weeks of post-IVR. Our recurrence window was noted earlier than Minz-Hinster study, where the mean age for retreatment was 51 weeks, corresponding to the 16 weeks post-IVB injection. Rationale for the anti-VEGF therapy. ROP is a biphasic disease with initial vaso-obliterative followed by vaso-proliferative phase. There is only a single burst of VEGF which causes the neovascular growth in ROP. This differentiated from other neovascular diseases which has a continuous VEGF release. Delay in anti-VEGF treatment when VEGF levels are decreasing may not be as effective and may promote the fibrosis. This is a recent change in protocol to treat ROP aggressively early with anti-VEGFs. Consequent to this, in our study, the overall rate of retreatment was only 25%. And in other studies, it has been reported in the range of 13 to 35%. Other studies, various studies of intravitreal anti-VEGF shows treatment success in range of 95 to 45%. We found it was around 75%. Ranibizumab has 10-fold higher binding affinity, smaller molecular weight, 1/4 intravitreal half-life. So theoretically, it has better efficacy and systemic safety profile with less neurological deficit and developmental delays. LION-R did not show any neurodevelopmental delay, although the babies requiring rescue therapy for recurrences did demonstrate a higher incidence of psychomotor and mental impairment. Coming to the RAINBOW trial, which we were part of. It was a randomized open label trial with 3 arms having intravitreal injection of 0.2, 0.1 dose and a laser. Treatment success was observed in 80% with 0.2 dose, whereas it was 66 in laser group. Coming to the conclusion, we found IVR achieved a stable retinal vascularization with low rate of complications and fewer recurrences. Ranibizumab appears to achieve a similar anatomical outcome as bevacizumab without additional risk for major complication or systemic side effects. Further prospective randomized studies with larger sample size are required to confirm this observation. It was a small retrospective study with appropriate control. Study population was limited to the Asian patients with tertiary hospital setting. We did not perform FFA. The take-home message will be early diagnosis and treatment with IVR is key factor in treating ROP babies. Single timely injection with adequate follow-up is an effective management.
Thank you, Dr. Purva. I think it's a good message. And the in thing is anti-VEGF for these small little children, and which is safer. You are right. Anything? I mean, in cases where you had done laser photocoagulation additionally, so what was the incidence of myopia?
So we have followed only for 6 months, but we are
Okay.
following the babies.
Right, right.
One question I just wanted to ask about the birth weight. Your cutoff birth weight is in fact lower, which is for Indian setup. In India, we see higher birth weight babies. I think your cutoff was less than 1500 grams.
Yes.
Isn't it? So
Yes.
how do you comment on that?
Ma'am, ours is a tertiary hospital referral center. So more babies are coming for the NICU admission, and then primary neonatologists used to send us. So we observed that the baby's weight was less than 1.500 grams, and they used to send. So we used to screen.
That means only inborn babies were taken,
Yes, ma'am.
not other, because otherwise it goes higher.
Yes,
Oh.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Please call the next speaker, Dr. Vivek Dave.
Yes. Do we have Dr. Vivek Dave over here?
Yeah, good morning. I'm there. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible. You are visible. I would request you to please start screen sharing.
All right.
Visible. The screen is also visible, sir. Please begin.
Screen
with
is also
the
visible.
presentation.
All right. So good morning, everyone. I'll be beginning with my presentation on subretinal injection of stem cell derived RP cells, a 6-month safety and integration in a rat model. My AIS number is as mentioned, and I have no financial disclosures. As we are aware, retinitis pigmentosa is a genetic degenerative retinal disorder with no definitive therapeutic cure as of present. The propounded possible therapies going ahead bifurcate into either gene therapy, which is specific for the RP65 mutation related disease, and more specifically the stem cell based cellular replacement, which could either be embryonic induced pluripotent stem cells or via the mesenchymal cells. Of these cells which have had the maximum interest in general recently are the induced or the iPS cells. Herein, somatic cells which are mature are taken from a donor and are exposed to the Yamanaka factors and reprogrammed to form a stem cell. And then these cells, when exposed to other specific growth factors, can be converted back to an end stage differentiation of these cells of our choice. So in our previous work, what we had done was we took nude mice, which are mice models which are immunocompromised, and therein the cells which were created in our lab and converted into the RP cells were injected in the subcutaneous space in these animal models. After having injected them into the subcutaneous space, they were subjected to histopathologic examination and immunohistochemical staining 16 weeks down the line. And what we found were that these RP cells derived from pure cultures of iPS in our labs neither proliferated abnormally nor induced any teratomas in the nude mice. That means these human RP lab created cells were safe in the body of an immunocompromised animal. So with this background, we went ahead to assess the safety and integration of subretinal injection of these cells in an ex vivo animal model at 6 months. This was an ex vivo prospective preclinical animal study. We included 16 eyes, and the animal model that was used was a blind Royal College of Surgeon rat, or the blind RCS rats. The study was conducted at the LV Prasad Eye Institute and the National Center for Laboratory Animal Sciences, National Institute of Nutrition, Hyderabad, India, and was approved by the Institute Review Committee of both the institutes. All animal handling was done in accordance with the ARVO statement. Herein is a photograph showing the setup where the ketamine anesthetized rat has been laid down with a specifically created speculum to hold and prop out the eyeball, and using a dissecting microscope, the cells were injected in the subretinal space. This is a small video clip showing how the subretinal injection is done. Under the dissecting microscope, we have entered through the limbus using an MVR and an incision is made into the retina. Once the incision is made, about 0.2 million cells on a 39 gauge needle, flat tip needle on a Hamilton syringe was used to inject these cells into the subretinal space. So here you can see the below the vessels, showing that it's in the subretinal space, and a nice blob of cells getting injected into the subretinal space. Herein, we see the examination under anesthesia of the same rat around 5 to 6 months down the line, and nice pigmented cells can be seen spread out in the subretinal space, which show the presence of the human RPE cells at that timeline in the follow-up. This is an immunohistochemical section of one of the sacrificed rats, wherein you can nicely see the track via which these cells are injected from the vitreous cavity across the retina into the subretinal space, and they are settling down on the RPE choroid layer. Immunohistochemical examination further showed us that these cells not only settle, but then they home in on the Bruch's membrane, and wherever they are homing in, the corresponding area in the neuroretina shows preservation of the photoreceptors. So this shows that there is some amount of rescue effect that occurs due to the transplantation of these cells. More importantly, immunohistochemical staining showed that these RPE cells were shining blue on the DAPI stain, showing telling us that these are viable retinal pigment epithelial cells. And on the H mitoantigen, fluorescence was positive, telling us that these had human mitochondria. That means these were the same cells that were injected into the subretinal space of the rat that were created in the laboratory. In conclusion, live pigmented RPE cells survived in the subretinal space beyond 3 months of injection. There was no tumor formation noted till 6 months post-injection. The RPE injected cells protected the overlying photoreceptor layers from degeneration. And at 6 months, the injected cells expressed human-specific mitochondria and RPE-specific markers, demonstrating their viability. We also had certain addendum observations during our learning curve, which were that the injection site hemorrhage is a strict no-no in such experiments. So if there is hemorrhage occurring there, the viable cells undergo necrosis, and that animal could get lost. Also, all pigmentation does not represent live cells. Unless immunohistochemically examined, some of the pigment that you see grossly would just represent ghost cells, which are dead cells, but they still sort of retain their pigment. So an immunohistochemical examination and cross-checking is pretty important. Also, immunosuppression of the animal, because what we are injecting into the animal is a xenotissue. So the immunosuppression with pre and post-injection of oral cyclosporin is very important.
Doctor, the way your time is up, you finish up.
Yeah.
Fast.
Yeah. In conclusion, this demonstrated that the efficiency of our cell protocol and purity and safety of RP cells for future in vivo applications in cell therapy for retinal degenerations. And unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 effect, we could not step up the experiment and check for functional assessment, which would be done later along the year as the things open up. So these are my acknowledgements of my co-workers, and thank you for the kind attention.
From which part of the body did you take cells? Human cells?
We took cells from the skin.
Okay. And in how many cases you have done this? In how many rats?
We have done this in 16 eyes.
Okay.
16
Yeah,
rat eyes.
thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, good study. Thank you. Next
Thank you.
speaker, please.
Yes, so for the next speaker, we have Dr. Srishendu Mahato. Do we have Dr. Srishendu over here?
Yeah, good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, doctor. May I please request you to, yes, we are able to see you. Also, you are audible. Now, please start screen sharing.
Yeah, just a minute.
Sure, sir. I would like to inform judges that this is the last presentation for the session.
Purnesh, 1 second. Judges, sorry to intervene in between. The papers for the KOS, OS, UKSOS, and DOS, they have been shifted to the other session. So here we will be judging 10 papers. So Dr. Srishendu Mahato can go on with the presentation. Next, we have 3 more papers remaining.
Yeah.
So
Thank
Dr.
you,
Mahato, you can go on with your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
AV team,
We will study In this study, we tried to evaluate the role of epiretinal membrane removal with or without internal limiting membrane peeling in cases of ectopic phobia. Epiretinal membrane is a term which is used to describe cellular proliferation at the vitreoretinal interface on the internal limiting membrane. The majority of ERMs are idiopathic and the prevalence increases with increasing age. Ectopic inner foveal layers is a OCT-based terminology which has been included in new OCT-based classification of ERM. Surgery is the only available treatment for ERM and indicated in case of distorted or reduced vision. So there are a few challenges we face to tackle a patient of ERM, like to decide the optimal timing for surgery, to find out optimal surgical technique, and to find out reliable prognostic biomarkers. Ectopic inner foveal layers has been defined as presence of continuous hyporeflective and hyperreflective bands extending from the inner nuclear layer and inner plexiform layer across the foveal region. And it should be visible in all SDOCT scans which are taken by centering the fovea. There are 4 stages according to this classification by Goveto et al. In stage 1 and stage 2, we can see that at the foveal pit, the inner layers are absent, but in stage 3 and stage 4, they are present at the foveal pit. So these are the ectopic fovea. Aim of our study was to determine the anatomical and functional impact of ERM removal with or without ILM peeling in cases of idiopathic ERM associated ectopic fovea. It is a 4 years retrospective international study from a single center by a single surgeon, and it is conducted between January 16 to December 19. Total 39 eyes of 39 patients were included who were operated for idiopathic ERM with ectopic fovea presentation, and the surgical procedure performed perspinal vitrectomy with ERM removal, with or without ILM peeling, and with or without phacoemulsification. So we evaluated the following relationship: pre and post-op BCVA, pre and post-op central foveal thickness, and effect of ILM peeling on post-op BCVA and post-surgery ectopic fovea resolution. Parametric and non-parametric tests were used to compare categorical and non-categorical variables with appropriate significance. Coming to result, total 39 patients were included, among which 64% were male and 36% female. Mean age 58.34 years, median duration of symptom 8.97 months, mean follow-up 20.74 months. So 33% of the patients underwent PPB with ERM removal, and the rest 67% of the patient underwent PPB with ERM removal and ILM peeling. When we compared the BCVA, there was a significant improvement of vision after surgery, and there was a significant reduction of central foveal thickness after surgery. The role of ILM peeling not noted to have any significant impact on post-op BCVA and duration of ectopic fovea resolution. The recurrence of ERM also do not have any significant impact on post-op BCVA. Coming to discussion, idiopathic ERM is a really challenging condition because to find out the optimal timing for surgery is very difficult even by an experienced VER surgeon, and there are hardly any prognostic biomarker well defined. Ectopic inner foveal layer is a new OCT-based terminology, and there is a paucity of data regarding its relationship with ERM. In literature search, we could found there are a few meta-analysis and systematic review on idiopathic ERM, and most of them has showed that ILM peeling can give good anatomical success, but no improvement or doubtable improvement in case of functional outcome. And ectopic inner foveal layers already defined as a poor prognostic factor for ERM. To our best knowledge, this is the first study which has evaluated the role of ILM peeling on ectopic fovea resolution. Though our study does not show any promising result of ILM peeling on ectopic fovea resolution or post-op BCVA, but our study shows that good post-op BCVA after surgery in ERM with ectopic fovea. To conclude, ILM peeling is still a debatable procedure in cases of idiopathic ERM, may or may not be associated with ectopic fovea. Our study has concluded that ILM peeling does not give better outcome in cases of ectopic fovea resolution, though ERM removal itself can improve the vision in these complicated cases. And definitely there is an unmet need to find out reliable prognostic biomarker as well as optimal surgical procedure for idiopathic ERM associated with or without ectopic fovea. Thank you.
Doctors, if we have any kind of questions for the presenter, please go ahead.
I think he has said ILM peeling is not required, may or may not be done. That's there, but once that ectopic inner foveal layer is there, this is a prognostic factor for the ectopic fovea final outcome.
Yes,
So
that is a poor
you
prognostic
have
factor.
explained in I mean clear terms what is to be done. Are there other office
Yes,
bearers?
yes, doctor. We have other.
Judges are there.
Yes, we have presenters. So next
Yeah,
up, may I,
yeah.
next up, may I please invite Dr. Purva Walvekar.
Yes.
Purva.
Yeah. Purva, she has already done.
Yes.
Yeah. She has paradigm shift in management of ROP. She has already done.
Yes, Dr.
Those who have not done, I'll repeat their names. If they are there, you just call them.
Dr. Vivek Dave, are you present?
Dr. Vivek Dave has presented, Priyam. Let Dr.
That's
Vinod take over and take the names of those who are not presented.
Okay,
No,
Dr.
she's
Rahul
right. If
Shroff is not
Dr.
presented.
Dave is there, yeah, I had told them to be there till the end of this meeting. I'm in this session.
Okay.
So that we can ask questions.
Dr. Rahul Shroff.
Excuse me, my question, Dr. Ritesh Sharma, has he presented? He hasn't presented, right?
I'll tell you the names who have not presented. Ritesh Verma has not presented. Ritesh Verma has not presented. The paper was reactivation of ROP post intravitreal bevacizumab in AP-ROP. So next, if he is there, it's okay. Otherwise, we'll go to the next. The other one who has not presented is OCT angiography changes in CNVM secondary to neovascular ARMD following anti-VEGF treatment. Dr. Shroff Rahul Ashok.
Yes.
He was to present. Is he there?
I don't think so.
Audiovisual team, please announce.
Just a minute, Purnesh. Just a minute, Priyam. Dr. Vinod is announcing the name of all those presenters who have not presented. So I request in the panelists, if the names are taken and you have not presented, please voluntarily tell I am there so that we can start the presentation.
Yeah.
If nobody is there, we can continue with the discussion. And in the chat box, Purnesh, please write those who have not presented, raise your hand, or please interrupt and tell that you have entered the hall, so we'll take a presentation. In the meanwhile, the discussion can be continued because we have to be in the session till the allotted time.
Yeah. So next person who has not presented is Dr. Deeksha Rani. Her paper is
Sir,
Heads
I'm
Up.
here.
Yeah, you are there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Start. Then at that. Yeah. Thank you.
Is my screen visible?
Yeah, screen is visible.
Good morning, everyone. My topic is role of 3D heads-up digitally assisted vitreoretinal surgery in patients with primary and recurrent rheumatogenic retinal detachment with proliferative vitreoretinopathy, a prospective randomized controlled trial. I have no financial disclosures to make. The conventional intraoperative viewing includes looking through binoculars of microscope, which leads to a head-down position, which is associated with musculoskeletal disabilities to the surgeon, which leads to decrease in surgeon's longevity. 3D digitally assisted system is a new means of intraoperative visualization. This is a passive system in which the two images are mixed horizontally and then separated by polarized glasses worn by the surgeon. Each eye of the surgeon sees a slightly horizontally disparate image and they are fused which leads to perception of depth. The binoculars of microscope are removed and it is replaced with a high definition camera which transmits the images through fiber optic transmission to a 55-inch 4K display, which is kept at 1 meter from the surgeon. The proposed advantages includes better ergonomic surgeon's posture, better depth of field, lower endoillumination levels, better resolution and contrast, enhanced magnification, better peripheral visualization, and it is also a superior teaching tool. The aim of a study was to compare the outcomes of 3D heads-up digitally assisted vitreoretinal surgery and conventional analog microscope in eyes with primary and recurrent RRD with proliferative vitreoretinopathy. The study began after obtaining ethical clearance from the Institute Ethics Committee. It was a prospective randomized controlled trial with 68 patients, 50 had primary RD and 18 had recurrent RD who were followed up for 3 months. The primary objective was anatomical success in terms of redetachment rate, and secondary objectives were post-op BCVA, duration of surgery, complications, and surgeon and observer satisfaction score. Phakic and pseudophakic patients of age more than 18 years who were willing to consent and had primary or recurrent RD with PVR more than C1 were included. They could have any refractive error. We excluded the patients with other visually significant diseases like primary open angle glaucoma, disc pallor, age-related macular degeneration, and corneal opacity. Traumatic or secondary RDs were also excluded, and we also excluded aphakics from our study. The patients who met the eligibility criteria underwent a detailed pre-treatment workup, which included visual acuity, intraocular pressure, anterior segment examination, posterior segment examination, SWEP source OCT, and Optos CP for the documentation, and they were randomized to either group using computer-based allocation method. All patients underwent encerclage followed by 23-gauge vitreoretinal surgery with silicone oil insertion. In 3D group, white pellis was adjusted before every surgery. Iris aperture of the camera was opened at 30%. Microscope illumination level was 42% for 3D group and 80% for conventional analog microscope. Endo illumination levels were adjusted as per the need. And at the end of surgery, both surgeon and observers were given the satisfaction scores to fill. Coming to results, the baseline data in terms of age, gender distribution, axis length, and duration of RD was comparable in all the 4 subgroups of both the groups. Most of the patients in all the 4 subgroups had either no surgery in the past or had a history of uncomplicated cataract surgery in the past. One patient in primary RD group has a history of YAG capsulotomy, and 5 patients had a history of complicated cataract surgery. The severity of proliferative vitreoretinopathy in terms of anterior and posterior PVR was also equally distributed in all the 4 subgroups. One patient operated on 3D DAVs with primary RD had CD, while 4 patients in conventional group had preoperative choroidal detachment. Coming to primary outcomes, at the end of 3 months, 2 patients in 3D group and 3 patients in conventional analog microscope had a redetachment. This difference was statistically insignificant. Similarly, even in the recurrent RRD group, we had a similar outcomes in terms of redetachment rate. The mean best corrected visual acuity also improved significantly at the end of 3 months, and there was no significant difference in all the 4 groups. Duration of surgery was similar in both the groups, as we can see here. And the endo illumination levels, however, significantly lower in 3D group of both primary and recurrent RD. The complications seen were iatrogenic break and subretinal oil or PFCN. These were also equally distributed in both the subgroups with no specific differences. Analysis of surgical satisfaction score showed that 3D system was a clear winner in all the fields, including comfort, visibility, visualization, and simplicity of use, except 4 genres. That is MIOCT quality and absence of eye fatigue, back pain, and neck pain, where both conventional and 3D DAVs were similar as per our surgeon. All our observers found 3D system to be a better tool in terms of understanding the anatomy and comprehending the surgical steps being performed, which makes 3D system an excellent teaching tool. Our study had certain limitations, that is, it was a small sample size, short follow-up duration, and silicone oil removal was not done in the stipulated time, so we cannot comment on any difference between post-SOR detachments. So to conclude, 3D system is a safe and efficacious means of performing vitreoretinal surgeries. Surgical outcome, duration of surgery, and complications were comparable. Endoillumination levels were lower, which protects from macular phototoxicity, better peripheral visualization, and a better teaching tool. So based on these findings, we recommend the introduction of 3D system in medical colleges and fellow training institutes if economically and logistically feasible. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. I think in the last line, you have concluded everything. Everything is good except the cost.
Yes,
and
sir.
Of course, we should start in all institutions, those who can afford. So we can buy our comfort with the cost. Of course, with the time,
one question,
technology
sir.
is always, pardon?
Sir, it is beneficial for the postgraduate institutes, sir, definitely.
Absolutely.
All the training
advantages are
institutes,
there.
sir.
Yeah, training institutes, definitely.
Yeah, yes. Let's start with training institutes, big institutes, and those who can afford. And then technology is always welcome. Technology with time, as the prices will go down, I think it will come to, many ophthalmologists, and it's always welcome. I think 62% of the ophthalmologists they have said they are suffering from ergonomic problems. They are having neck pain or something. Even I am having neck pain myself. What to tell others? So I think I wish I also buy this, and so that we can do. Especially this is being used in anterior segment surgery and
Yes, sir,
quite
in anterior
other
segment as
centers.
well.
And
And cataract surgery also to be done very clearly. When we
Yes, sir. Various surgeries, cataract, trabeculectomy,
yes,
even
yes.
penetrating keratoplasty is being done on
it needs
this.
to be done very clearly.
I think it will be more useful for vitreoretinal surgeries, which take much longer.
Yes, sir.
And this instrument can really save our neck or neck of the retina surgeons.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So thank you very much. It was a nice talk.
Thank you, sir.
You have presented it well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Are there other judges and chairpersons here, or they have gone? Professor Asim Saab is there.
No, all the judges will be there, sir. They will be evaluating the papers. So any more papers are left? Any other speaker has joined in?
Sir, I'll make the final last announcement for the 3 speakers left. Dr. Rahul Shroff, are you here?
एक second. Just which one is paper number 305. Ritesh Verma is not there. He has not presented. But what are the number of people who have not
Vinod sir, there are 3 papers that are left. So paper number 305, Dr. Ritesh Verma is left.
Right.
Paper number 364, Dr. Rahul Shroff, he's left.
364 Rahul Shroff, yes.
Ji, sir. And sir, paper number 418, Dr. Purva Valvekar. She
has already. No. She has presented. She has presented. Yeah.
So 2 papers remaining, sir.
Yeah, 2 papers remaining. So Dr. Porwal.
We have 17 more minutes. We can't leave the hall. In these 7 minutes, if any 2 speakers come, we can take up the presentations.
Oh, right.
Else,
Yeah. We'll have to wait
if
for
the
them.
presenters are still there, like I read in the chat box, someone wanted to ask a question to Daivat, someone wanted to ask a question to somebody else. So if any questioning wants to go ahead, you can go ahead. Before that, Priyam, we have the keynote address in this session or the next session?
No, not in this session.
So we can continue with the discussion. So just 10 minutes before the 9:25, re-announce if anybody is there who was absent to present. If nobody is there, you can continue with the discussion. At 9:25, please conclude and request all the judges to mark properly the mark sheet, sign on top and bottom, email or WhatsApp to the concerned number only. Please do not post these mark sheet on any group. Request once again to maintain confidentiality. Do not share on any group.
That is to be sent on one WhatsApp number.
One WhatsApp number is sent in the judges group. Please click the photograph of the mark sheet after signing and send it to that WhatsApp number or to the email address which is mentioned. I hope Dr. Asim, I'm clearly audible.
Yes.
I think Dr. Asim has also left.
No, he's there. Nobody is left. Sir, nobody is left. Judges are dedicated and speakers also are dedicated. So please continue with the discussion, sir.
Yes, that's right. So Dr. Asim, we will ask Dr. Asim any questions, sir, to anyone, or we can ask questions to each of ourselves.
How is your experience with tazobactam and piperidine injection intravitreal? Have you done recently in your practice or in institution? I am asking, sir.
These are the things now in our armamentarium, because EVS study is quite old now, and with hemorrhagic occlusive retinal vascularization with vancomycin in some cases, so we are sometimes reluctant to use this. So piperacillin, tazobactam, imipenem, linezolid, they all are new things into our drugs into our armamentarium, and they are really helpful. He had very rightly said, if normally there is no culture sensitivity to the other organisms and other drugs, and if we are having sensitivity to these drugs, we must use these drugs. So another thing I will always say that in treating endophthalmitis, whenever there are negative culture cases, we should always keep PCR in mind. So PCR is a very good thing. We should know always where this PCR can be done. The culture should be tissue should be, or fluid should be sent to that whatever lab is there. And many cases which are negative, and they will become positive with PCR. So around 50% chance of those which are negative, they will become positive with PCR. So time is a great importance here, because once the time goes off, we are not able to retrieve back the things, and damage is already done. So he had presented very well.
He has presented one patient.
Linezolid can also be given if culture sensitivity is available to these things.
He has presented one patient, sir.
I would like to add one more point. I think, as you rightly said, these drugs should be used only when the primary drugs are resistant.
Yes.
That is very important. Otherwise, I mean, these are the last line drugs we are available.
Doivat, you have told one patient has come to you after 3 months of operation. So whether it is it was thought that the lens is the main factor for developing this endophthalmitis. So we knew in our time, and also during last 10 years, that there is the Propionibacterium acne is one of the important organism that is present in the bag, and that also take into mind whether you have done there, and removal of that bag with IOL removal, with PPV, with injection piperacillin was helpful in that situation or not?
Should I answer that question? Here it has been recently found that P. acne, now its recent name is the Achromobacter xylooxidans. This is the new name of
Yes.
And nowadays it is sensitive to ceftazidime plus imipamine.
Yes.
And if we should try that, and if even of course removal of capsule along with the IOL, that is always better in such cases.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, this is the
I would
latest
like
knowledge.
to ask one question, sir. So what is your take on doing vitrectomy, early vitrectomy, or do we still follow EBS guidelines? Or if the facility of vitrectomy is available, we should go ahead with vitrectomy in the first go?
I think we should now change our guidelines according to ourselves. Now the better instrumentation is available, better surgeons are available, I should say. And now we should not wait much.
So,
at least whatever they are saying in EBS study, that is, I mean,
again, I would like to add that the EVS study was done in the era of 20 gauge and 23 vitrectomy. So now it's an era of 25 and 27. The surgical technique has become so good. And at the end of the day, the aim is to reduce the bacterial load. Once we remove the vitreous, I think these patients fare really well. So I think EVS now has become a little old school.
Sir, it is better to do
vitreous
vitrectomy.
tap, or we've shifted to vitreous biopsy, most of us? Or are we still doing vitreous tap initially?
No, vitreous biopsy is the main, nowadays it should be tried, madam.
Biopsy and not tap.
Yes.
Biopsy is, of course, preferred.
Yes.
This point, when we should go for vitrectomy, that again will depend upon the type of setup one has and one's experience also. Those, I mean, with good vitrectomy machine, with good experience, we should not wait much, because of course the load of bacteria, whatever infective organism is there, that will be reduced to quite an extent, and antibiotics, etc., they will be effective. Otherwise, if we keep on waiting. I think basic thing, what I tell my friends, those who are away, I mean, they have to send cases. I just tell them, I teach them how to give an intravitreal injection. So normally ceftazidime, vancomycin, or if they don't want to give vancomycin, something else, and give it and send it to the, whichever retina surgeon you want. And the retina surgeon will decide when he has to go first. So that very important time is saved in this. Because for one intravitreal injection, patient should not have to wait. Everybody now, people are giving anti-VEGF injections, and they should give antibacterial or whatever these injections also. So that will save eyes for them.
Sir, I have one question, sir.
Yes.
Sir, do you use usually if there is no break or if there is no RD, do you tend to use silicone oil in cases of endophthalmitis? Because I personally don't, until and unless there is maybe an iatrogenic break or a regmatogenous component. I don't tend to use silicone oil in cases. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, it's questionable. I think people have different choices. Some people they are doing it, others are not doing it. So it's individual. I don't inject silicone oil also. Yeah.
Sir and madam, I am asking one question, sir. One paper was there, but he or he not presented bevacizumab in ROP patients. Sir, whether it is now still advocated bevacizumab, or in that place you should give injection of ranibizumab? Because bevacizumab, we know that it is offline drug now, no? Because it is not being used for ophthalmic purposes, FDA not approved. So what is your opinion, madam and sir?
So I would say that in our setup, they say we prefer bevacizumab more than ranibizumab because systemically bevacizumab is still lesser amount for the kid. The molecule is bigger. So they say, yes, bevacizumab would still be better than ranibizumab, though Rainbow trial supports ranibizumab. But we've had experience with bevacizumab after BEAT study. So, and I think we are doing well.
Yeah, same is the case with me. I know institutions where bevacizumab is purely being used for this, and I don't think there are much differences between the two when we have systemic problems, whatever they are there. But of course, the cost factor is
Cost
a great.
concerns.
Everybody cannot afford. I mean, some charitable institutions, they are purely using this. They are also doing well. And we cannot do without bevacizumab. This is my take.
Can I answer the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I presented on the ROP topic. Our center was part of a Rainbow trial, which was an international trial. And we found out like 0.2 milligram dose was effective as compared to 0.1. And then we later on continued the same thing. The efficacy of both drugs are same, but as ranibizumab is a pre-filled and asepsis is less as compared to the bevacizumab. That is the one additional point as compared to.
Yeah, bevacizumab you have to take out.
Multi-dose vial.
Bevacizumab you can make aliquots.
Aliquoting.
But that I think not available.
That facility is not there everywhere, but it's not so difficult. If you find some microbiologist friend, they can do it for you.
Okay.
Then the risk of infection is not there at all.
Sir, in our institution, RIO Kolkata, we are not using bevacizumab. Some cases has occurred in Kolkata town. Some ophthalmologists usually in trouble with in court, and they usually faced some problems of being causing infection at the patients who were given bevacizumab the same vial. I think so. What is your opinion? You are telling that still it is being advocated because of low cost drug, and also it can be used for charitable institutions. But in our government sector, RIO Kolkata, we are not using, sir, please.
Pulling the drug from the same syringe, I don't advocate. Yeah.
Yes.
So whatever, if you have enough of patients, I mean, if you have 10, 15 patients, and the same day you once take out the medicine, and inject them, then the chances of endophthalmitis, they are not there, or infection, they are not there. But I have never done it that once I have opened it and I will use it second time. So this is the way to save yourself.
So how about the AIS?
Can I interrupt, please? Can I interrupt, please? It is
sir.
9:20. I request all the judges to please conclude this session so
Thank
that
you.
we can start with the next session. And
Thank you,
I
Amit.
posted in the group. Yeah, Priyam.
Yeah.
I
Dr.
request all
Sabina,
of
give
you
a
to
vote of
please,
thanks. Yeah.
just 1 minute. I request all
Yeah.
of you all to please on your camera so that we can take a group photograph. Priyam is going to take a good photograph of all of us. So request all the speakers, everybody to on their camera. And I posted on the group also that for the judges, the number, the email address, please do it only on that. Don't post your mark sheet on the group. Make it individualized and confidential. And I thank all the speakers, judges, everybody, the hall coordinators, Dr. Priyam, Purnish, and Manoj, the backend team, and all our esteemed judges, Dr. Asim, Dr. Vinod, Dr. Subina, all our esteemed speakers. Thanks a lot for conducting this session well on time and very smoothly. Thanks a lot. So we conclude this session
can
now.
we take a picture, please?
Yeah.
Can we all smile?
Yeah, without smile.
Okay.
Well,
Take a screenshot. Priyam, take a screenshot.
we-
Davat, go ahead and take a screenshot.
Yes, I'll take a screenshot.
You take a screenshot, that will be more clearer.
yeah.
Fine?
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So with
once-
this,
one
we
more-
conclude
one
the
more. We have the
session.
secretary.
Yeah.